But we do have, it appears we have 9 people counting myself. So should we get started?
Sounds good.
Would anyone like to suggest any changes to this agenda, including the order of items?
Linda, I know that Ryan told me he actually couldn't make it now because he had to do a demo. There was a conflict for his Avalon work. So if Mark needs help, I can step in because I'd been talking to Ryan about the working group charter.
Is this Carolyn?
I am sorry, yes. I am sorry. This is Carolyn from Northwestern.
Sure. That sounds good. If you can update us on that, that would be great. And I had tentatively put Trey's name beside the new component maintenance working group. I don't see Trey's name on the list yet. Is there anyone who's involved with that group who could speak to what that new working group is about? It sounded from the partner meeting like an important group that people should be aware of. So if there's no one who's on the group or directly involved in the group, I'll just briefly point you to the charge. Do we have anyone who can just give us an update on the spring Samvera partner meeting?
Oh, this is Richard. Yes, I can probably do that for you, Linda.
Great. Thank you, Richard. And the November Samvera Partners meeting, those of us who were there should maybe just talk about it. If there's anyone who wants to report officially, that would be great. Aviva will be joining us in the second half and will give a report from the Samvera Connect meeting. So do we have any other agenda items we need to add to this list? If not, let's go ahead and talk about the new governance working group. And you all have a link to the charge for that group. It's picking up where the last group left off, but Carolyn, can you talk to us a little bit about this?
Sure. I think many of us on the call were actually in the partner meeting that happened outside of right after Samvera Connect. So there, I think it was Mark who said he would draft a charter. It seemed like there was enough agreement that we should create a working group to take the governance discussion to the next level and well, first, I guess, recap the discussions that we had about governance at Samvera Connect and in the partner meeting itself for the community. So that's the sort of context and synthesis part of this. Well, and also synthesize, I guess, some of the options that the previous group that came together and wrote up the options for us, synthesize all of that information for the community, and then actually come forward with some recommendations about a pathway forward that I guess would go up to steering. So that's sort of what we talked about in the partner meeting and what Mark translated to a charter here for us. And Ryan Steens, who is our community and project manager for the Avalon grant, has written into his job description to help with the Samvera community globally. So he sort of came into this as someone who could move the working group charter process along, which is why he posted this to the listservs. He didn't quite internalize the working group, like how you actually do it and how you send out a call for participation. So I think we had a little bit of some confusion, but we got it right. So the charter is now out there, and there is a call for participation. And you can also see in the charter the recommendation about the makeup of this working group, involving a couple people from before who worked on drafting the proposal with the different types of governance structures, as well as 2 to 3 people who are at the partner meeting from Samvera Connect, and an additional, I think, 1 or 2 people from the community at large, should we get any volunteers. I think the timeline might need to be changed with this a little, though. We already got a little behind schedule in terms of putting out the call for participation.
I think the bottom line goal, as we articulated at the partner meeting, was that we would have a proposal for people to vote on at the spring partner meeting.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Does that still
seem
to be realistic?
Honestly, I do think so, because I think technically the call for participation will close like right before like the 22nd of December. So I think that the working group can get together between the 1st or 2nd of the year and January 19th and still do all of the context and synthesis.
Are you getting, because it looks like the initial call for participation did set a date, a deadline of today, if I remember correctly. Are you getting the kind of volunteers to meet your membership goals?
Yeah, that's also a little confusing to me. I thought it would have to be open for 2 weeks. I noticed he did put December 8th on there. We already have it. We already had people from that partner meeting. I think it was Aviva, and I forget who else. Maybe 1 or 2 other people who were initially on the governance working. I don't know if it was a technical working group, but who drafted the report for us. So we definitely have people to fulfill that role. I volunteered. I think Nabila volunteered, and then Simeon Warner volunteered. So yes, we already have some volunteers for the sort of 2 or 3 other people from partners. I don't think we've gotten anyone just from the community at large yet, and Ryan volunteered to be more of the secretariat type role.
This is Richard, Carolyn.
Yes.
From my point of view, I think you really do have to leave this open for another week or so at least, because with the confusion over where the initial information was posted, Ryan's email, was it yesterday or the day before, was actually the first time there had been anything on the mailing lists. So I think you really need
right,
to...
Right. And that's what I was trying to clarify with him, because he's so new. I said to him, this needs to be open for 2 weeks. And so, yeah. So it should be December 22nd or 21st.
And in that time, I think you should encourage him to send out 2 or 3 reminders.
Okay.
Please.
You know, I was on the earlier group, which was really an ad hoc group that came out of last March's partner meeting. I don't think we ever did a chart. We never, and Mike Giarlo, you can correct me perhaps if I'm wrong. I don't think we did a charter document as we're doing with this working group, and I don't think we ever listed on the wiki page as an officially chartered working group. And I wonder if this time we want to do that, actually put the group on the wiki page in the wiki and have its own wiki page where in a broad sense progress is reported.
Just to jump in, Linda, before Mike maybe does, this is Richard. I did query quite some while back, while that group was going on, why it was not a proper working group in quotes. And there was a good reason for not doing that, though I can't just now remember what that was. Mike may remember. But I think there was agreement that this time round it needed to be a formal working group, and therefore would have all that stuff on the wiki as you just described.
+1.
Yeah, Ryan actually said he already got started on creating that wiki page too. So.
Great. Does anyone have any other questions for Carolyn about this working group and what the charter lays out? Hearing none, Carolyn, do you feel you're in a good position to report our discussion back to Ryan?
Yes, and thank you, Richard, for I definitely do need him to change that due date. Is there anything else, just because I haven't actually gone through the process of creating a working group for Samvera before, is there anything else we've also already misstepped and need to go back and fix? Have we created any more chaos that I can try and resolve for us?
I don't think so. It's a pretty lightweight process.
Just have a look at that document that Ryan pointed to on the wiki that tells you how to do it. As Mike said, it's not onerous, I don't think.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually what I pointed Ryan to. I was like, wait, something's going wrong here. Thanks.
Great. Well, the next agenda item, which I just arbitrarily put on our agenda, was to bring up the fact that we have another new working group formed, and I put a link to their page, and I think Trey Pendragon is the person I've seen send emails with the call for participation, but I don't see that Trey is joining us. Has anyone else who has joined since we first started active on this group? Well, I'll just say that this was one of the specific outcomes also of the partners meeting. We had different breakout groups at the partners meeting to look at things like solution bundles, and one of the breakout groups was to look at component maintenance. If I remember correctly, Beth Sadler reported back at the actual partners meeting about their conclusion that this working group needed to be formed. Now, I think there's probably room for us to have long discussions that we don't want to have today about what is a core component. But I still think this is a great working group and a valuable contribution to what we're doing. But I don't know that anyone active on the group is here today. Is there anything else that we need to say in this meeting about it?
This is Mike. I have a quick thing. So I believe what was initially suggested was 2 working groups, one and then another. The purpose of this first one, I believe, was to come up with a process for identifying what a shared component is. We called them core components for a little bit, and then I think we decided to call them shared components because core is exclusionary. So then after we've come up with that process and we've used the process to identify the shared components, I believe the other part of the work of this group is to figure out how to resource it. And then I believe the follow-up working group was to actually try that out for a set period of time to see how it goes. And the intent here is really to, over the past however many years, work on our solution bundles, Sophia, Avalon, Curation Concerns, Curate, Worthwhile, Hyrax now, Haiku, has actually subsidized most of the maintenance of our components. So as a result, the components kind of haven't had an identity of their own. They've just been whatever the solution bundles have needed them to be. And that has been at times an awkward dance. So this is really trying to bring more ownership of the components themselves. That's the aim, and that's I think the structure for these working groups.
Thanks, Mike. That's a great summary, and it explains what we're seeing there with phase 1 and what phase 1 is meant to be.
And Linda, your intention with having this on the agenda is just sort of raise awareness?
Correct. I thought it was a significant enough effort that it deserved our awareness of it.
Yeah, I agree. It does seem important.
And if the group is having trouble getting volunteers, that would also be significant. I don't know that that's necessarily the case, but we can certainly watch the appeals that Trey may continue to make to the tech list. Mike, is it your sense that enough people are volunteering, or?
To be honest, I don't know. I haven't looked at the charter yet, so I am not sure if they have 3 partners yet or how Trey and Ben feel about the number of people who've signed up. It's really important work, though, and I would encourage us to find ways to free up our folks' time so we have a nice cadre of developers who can help figure this out.
Yeah. I see 6 people listed on the group now, so I think that's a great start. Okay, so so that means we can move on to our next agenda item, if that's all right with everybody. And I originally had reporting from the November meetings first, but Aviva is going to be joining us late, and so I moved the agenda around to let's talk about the future in the spring Samvera Partner meeting. And Tom Kramer couldn't be here but offered some comments, but Richard, you could add some information to this?
I can certainly try. Those of us who were present at the partner meeting following Connect may remember that we all of us there, and how many were we, Linda? Best part of 40, weren't we?
Sure.
All of us agreed that we did want a full partner meeting in the spring, an opportunity for all partners to be present. And we decided between us that we would make an open request to partners to say, is there anyone out there who would like to host this meeting? For the past several years, it has been at Stanford. Some people have questioned why it is always at Stanford, and so we wanted there to be an opportunity for others to dive in. Actually, during the meeting, Rosalind Metz from Emory said that they could probably do it. I've been in contact with Rosalind, Rosie, some of you know her as, over the last few days, and they have had to pull out of that potential offer because the space, which I think was in their Students' Union, which she was envisaging having the meeting in, is no longer available to them. Which brings us to the note that Tom's put on the agenda, that at the moment the only offering for hosting is in fact Stanford. And that would be following the LibDev Connects meeting, which is the 26th to the 28th of March, Monday to Wednesday. So we would be looking at the partner meeting 29th and 30th of March. That's the Thursday, Friday, and I'm pretty certain without checking that Friday the 30th is actually Good Friday. So unless someone volunteers a space within the next 8 hours, I guess, which I find unlikely, then we will tie up the loose ends with Stanford and advertise the meeting as being there. I think that's all I have, Linda.
Okay. Does anyone have any ideas or thoughts about this? I think it's okay for me to let y'all know that Cincinnati was considering this very seriously and had even worked out a potential venue and some dates, and then we found out that Richard Spencer would be coming to campus around the same time. And we withdrew our tentative idea about putting a bid in.
Forgive my ignorance, Linda. Who's Richard Spencer?
He is the, some people refer to it as the alt-right leader who came to UVA's campus before the...
Oh, yes. Yes, okay. So, didn't make the connection, sorry.
So it just didn't, the timing did not seem right, and we thought, well, we could pick a different week, but then we learned that the timing of that Spencer event still wasn't absolutely certain. So we thought, wouldn't it be horrible luck if we picked a different time and then the university changed it to that time too. So in the interest of everyone's sanity, we withdrew.
Can I just commend you, Linda, and your folks at Cincinnati for looking into this and then making what was probably a difficult but very cautious and good decision.
Well, thank you. I was very disappointed. I was really looking forward to giving you all the tour guide to Cincinnati if you had accepted the idea. And
next year, Linda, next year.
The first tip being that if you fly into Cincinnati, you actually land in Kentucky. Don't panic. You're in the right place. So, so again, that call for institutions to register their intent is open through the end of the day today. I think it was mid-November or earlier when I think I saw the first email from Tom Zanville asking for interest.
It was November the 17th I got it open, yeah.
Okay. So hopefully there's no institution that is interested that has failed to see the call.
Yeah, and he sent out a reminder as well, so I think we've covered the bases.
So let's move on to the to a report from, and I'm putting the partners meeting first because I am still waiting for Aviva to join us because I think she has some statistics and things about attendance to the full Samvera Connect meeting. So so if we talk about the partners meeting that occurred after the Samvera Connect meeting, I think Richard earlier you commented that it seemed that there were perhaps 40 people there. That's my recollection as well. And we don't have really designated who can give a report at this call, but this is the first partners call we've had since that meeting. So it seems like we should have at least an informal discussion among ourselves about what we accomplished and what we thought about the partners meeting.
This is Mike. I'll go real quick. I just wanted to say that I was I thought now that I have some distance from the event itself, I had a bit of a rough week. I've come to realize, reflecting back on many of the conversations that we had, that I actually feel this was perhaps our most productive partner meeting in a good long time, and I'm quite satisfied with the discussions that we had and with the facilitation. So I'm quite pleased with this partner meeting and hoping that it can inspire future partner meetings to be just as good, if not better.
We spent some time really sort of laying some groundwork that we, I think, fully established our work going forward with governance. I hope the people who volunteered for the governance working group think that they have a firm foundation for that work.
I think so. This is Carolyn again. I was really pleased with the meeting. And I actually hadn't been to a partner meeting in quite some time, so it was really inspiring to be in the room with, the close to 40 people.
Jimmy and I think we had a good discussion.
We've mentioned the outcome of the chartering the new governance working group, the outcome of chartering the new components maintenance working group that's now in phase 1. There was one other outcome that actually occurred at the very end of the partner meeting, and that was to move forward with, if I am phrasing this correctly, positioning our fundraiser to be targeted to support the idea of a community, positioning our fundraising to be targeted to the idea of supporting a community manager. Is that?
Could I just rephrase that slightly?
Yes, please.
To do the fundraising, to do the announcements around the fundraising and what we might use the money for, to include the possibility of a full-time post. I'm reluctant to use the phrase community manager because I think one of the things that's still rather vague at the moment is exactly what that job description would be. And it may well be that it's targeted far more towards sort of technical management of our software, or product ownership or something, rather than what I regard as a sort of softer job description of community manager, which would involve things like connect and partner meetings, and which might be part of it, but that wouldn't be the focus of it.
Thank you, Richard. Is it in the past, with the sort of ad hoc governance group we've referred to that got started after the March partners meeting, there was a sense that we needed to be further along with governance before we looked at a staff position. But I think one outcome from the meeting was that people were essentially empowering the steering committee to move forward with a staff position on an independent arc. Now, am I reading too much into that by saying that?
I think you are, actually, yes.
Okay.
I don't think there was any notion that steering should take this on and do something about it. I would certainly back you to the extent that I think there was a general feeling within the 36, I've actually just pulled up the notes, the 36 people who were there, that the time was about right that we should start thinking about staff. But I certainly, I'd be interested to hear what other people say, because several of you were there. But I don't think that there was a mandate to do it at the moment.
Yeah, I think the mandate stopped at framing the fundraising and empowering us to do fundraising and see how far we got with it. But my understanding was that we should probably wait to see what kind of funds we can raise before we check back with the partners to see how far our remit goes.
Yeah, I mean, there were several, as I recall, there were a couple of things I would mention. One, I remember saying, and I firmly believe this, that if we're going to get a person of appropriate caliber for this job, whatever the exact job description may be, we're going to have to be able to offer them 2 years employment, which means a substantial amount of money available to us. And that was part of the reason for trying to do next year's fundraising with the potential of a post in mind to put that sort of level of funds in place. But also, I remember there was some discussion about whether, in fact, we might find another way to fill the post, and that is to persuade a university somewhere to release someone, again, of appropriate caliber on a year or two secondment, so that if it all went pear-shaped, that person had a job to go back to at the end of the period. We might want to look at doing it that way. So I think there are quite a few things that still need discussion, still need thrashing out. But yes, I do think there is the notion there that that's a place we ought to be moving to have a full-time member of staff.
I think all I was trying to indicate is that my sense of the discussion was that there was a mandate to move forward on resolving these things.
Yes, sure.
And that means that whereas the governance working group, we hope will be coming with a proposal we can vote on in the partners meeting, there might still be some progress on this issue too. We're moving in parallel. It might not be that much more to report on, but it's now, perhaps one could say, somewhat in motion.
Yeah, this is Rick. I joined a little bit late. Sorry about that. But I think I definitely appreciate Richard's framing of that as it's kind of a clearer call from the community to do this, and how it actually is framed. Being a little bit tentative. I think the notions of having some product owner aspects, really align with the things I was hearing. As well as especially from the standpoint of thinking about, for example, how we compare it to, say, the Apache Foundation in terms of the governance, where we differ is with a much greater need for customer and community engagement with a lot of front-end services and applications, and it's a little bit different, but at the same time, seems like there's a combination of responsibilities that could be served there, especially when it's looking to coordinate potentially more than multiple product owners across various things. Yes, but I also very much liked the portion of the meeting where we broke into the smaller groups. I found that to be the most productive portion.
And in terms of this ball sort of somewhat rolling forward, and I wasn't there on the second day, and maybe I sort of missed the comment, but the ball is in the hands of steering or the governance working group, or who is moving it forward?
My sense, for what it's worth, Andrew, and other people I'm sure will comment, is that, as several of us have said, and Rick just said again, there seems to be a clear mandate from the community to move in this direction. We need to put in ourselves as a community into a state where we could actually do it. And the first bit of that is probably to get more funds in the bank. The second bit of that is to see the outcome of the governance discussions and how such a post might fit into whatever's proposed there. And when we bring those two together, we might be in a position to actually start doing something concrete.
That's helpful. Thank you, Richard, for describing it in that way. So is there anything that the community, we have the new governance working group. My sense is that fundraising is at this point in time primarily coordinated by steering, but is there any other need for any more organization around this at this time?
I don't think there's a need. I mean, we did at that same partner meeting discuss other things that we might want to spend a bit of money on, bearing in mind that we might also want to try and keep most of it in the bank. But I remember there was a discussion about potentially putting a bit of money into documentation. I think that was going to be discussed with the documentation working group. I just can't find it in my notes instantly. There were one or two things that had very small financial consequences that were discussed.
Accessibility review was perhaps the other.
Yeah, the accessibility review actually was pretty well done and dusted by that stage, and that has been commissioned since. We've actually signed the contract. But I think the feeling was let's not touch more money than we actually need to, because we may need it for this appointment if and when. Oh, there was a small amount of money for ongoing trademark work. I should tell you, just as an aside, it looks as though I should grab some wood and cross all my fingers and toes, but it looks as though the American and Canadian trademark for the name is fine. That looks as if it's going through, but we will by now have asked the lawyers to also do the trademarking in Europe. There was a deadline to that because I think it had to be filed within 6 months of the American request, and that time is about now. So we got it in on December the 1st, I understand, which has, I think there's a $2,000 filing fee, but that was all because the lawyer's fees are already provided for. I think that's about it. So coming back to fundraising, which was your original question, we have a mechanism set up with Duraspace for doing the fundraising. It may well be that those of us involved in that might well send out an email to the partners lists. I think it would be partners rather than community, to say this is the sort of wording we propose, is that okay with you? But other than that, I don't think we need a large amount of help on that. Though, anyone who wants to get involved, please volunteer. Always open to help.
So I think we've managed to digest the partner meeting. Is there anything else? I think, and a number of us, of course, were at that meeting, but not all of us. Is there anything else we need to bring up that was a work product of that partner meeting?
This is Chris from Hull. I should point, indicate, it was agreed that we try and form a marketing and communications working group as well, which I am tasked with kicking off, and will be doing so in the near future. That may make a set of suggestions for small amounts of expenditure, depending on what conclusions it reaches. Yeah. But again, it would not be anticipated to be a large amount in any way.
Great.
There were two. I've just been pulling up an email because actually I went through the notes, Linda, not so very long ago, looking for loose ends. One or two, just I don't think they need discussion, just headlines that I know are out there needing still to be picked up. A basic Samvera slide deck. So a PowerPoint slide deck which would contain within it the basic messages about the Samvera community that we hoped anyone doing a presentation would try and convey. But also that slide deck would then give a common template for all the presentations. Someone suggested that we should have a small logo which says a product of the Samvera community, which could then be attached to local applications that use the Samvera software underneath to try and just give ourselves a presence at that level. As Chris said, a marketing working group tasked with putting together a What is Samvera leaflet or leaflets, one of which, for instance, would be aimed at senior management in institutions, one of which would be aimed at potential adopters, and perhaps a third aimed at commercial partners. And that group would probably also, or certainly might, coordinate the production of conference goodies. And I suggested, although this hasn't actually been, the working group isn't there yet to discuss it with, but I personally would actually like that working group to take an overview of branding for the community as a whole. Otherwise, that's rather vague. And we also said we would convene a working group to manage next year's annual report. And then the governance working group. Yeah. Okay. So that was my list.
Great. Well, unless we have any other questions about what happened at the partner meeting and where we stand, let's talk about Samvera Connect. Now, I was hoping that Aviva would...
Linda, can I just chop in before you do, and offer my apologies. I need to drop out at this stage. Have a good weekend, all.
Thanks, Richard.
Aviva's here.
Oh, great. I just didn't see your name on the WebEx.
Oh, I just walked into Carolyn's office because it was going to be faster than trying to get online.
Sure, great. So could we jump in then to a report from the Samvera Connect Organizing Committee, which I know you were?
Sure. So I'll be honest with you, I actually don't have a tremendous report to give you. We had about 175 people who attended. We had a couple of people who showed up having not actually registered. We just let them come. There were only about 2 or 3 of them. We are waiting on final numbers from the hotel. Sean is in the process of negotiating the sort of final numbers on that, but it looks like we are about where we thought we were going to be, so things are looking good. We should be able to give back to the next year planning committee, so Utah, about $10,000. Again, that's going to be sort of dependent upon what the final numbers are with the hotel. That does include the money that has been carried forward from every other Samvera Connect, so we didn't make money on this per se. It's just being passed along. And Stanford has finished printing the second run of the Samvera Connect t-shirts, or the Samvera t-shirts. And we have a list of people who had requested them, and we are going to be reaching out to a few people for whom we do not have addresses or contact information. Oh, and Karen Estlund and I are meeting with the Utah folks and Chris Diaz, I think it's next week, to talk about transition and handoff.
Great. Thank you for that report, Aviva. I thought the conference, I thought it was a very successful event. I certainly got a lot out of it as an attendee. Does anyone have any questions for Aviva or comments you'd want to make about Samvera Connect? personally think it's great that we're doing this once a year and then also having the virtual connect.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'll
it was
echo Linda's comments.
I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of work on our staff's time, and I think that the program planning committee really deserves like so many kudos. I can't even begin to tell you. They really pulled everything together and made a phenomenal conference, and I'm really just so pleased with the work that they did. You know, like I said, we did a lot on our end, but they really just like their work was extensive, and I think that as a community we really should acknowledge them. So
+1 to that for both the local host committee and the conference organizing committee.
Yes, +1.
Well, we didn't. I think let me ask if anyone else wants to bring anything up about Samvera Connect. So does anyone have any announcements they want to make?
This is Andrew Rauner from WashU. I just wanted to make people aware of the Library Publishing Forum conference coming up, I think, in May. That's being introduced let me get this wording right, Publishing Platforms Pre-Conference. And Michigan is representing Samvera somewhat in presenting on Fulcrum, but I am not aware that of anyone doing anything specifically for haiku or Hyrax, and just wanted to make people aware of that, and I'll try to send out an email just to let people know that may be an opportunity to communicate to people interested in that area that don't always intersect with Samvera.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anyone have any other announcements?
Chris here from Hull. Just to let people know that we're having our next meeting of the Samvera Europe user group on the 14th of December, next Thursday, which will be an opportunity for those of us who were at Samvera Connect to bring others up to speed. And we're also looking a lot more closely at the Research Data Shared Service, which is a JISC initiative that is looking to make quite active use of Samvera for research data management, with JISC present, and also a number of those people who will be adopting Samvera for that purpose as well. As and when there is more concrete information on that, I'll look to try and bring something forward to the broader partners call about it, because it would be an interesting initiative to share with others.
Thank you, Chris. I think we just heard 2 announcements about 2 very interesting initiatives, what's happening in the publishing, digital publishing, and then research data management. We'll have to watch that as well.
Hey, Chris, this is Mike. Just for the notes, where would folks go to keep track of the Samvera Europe meetings? Are those on the Samvera wiki somewhere?
That's a good point. We probably haven't been keeping our Samvera wiki presence up to date on those meetings because we tend to do it through the Samvera Europe Google Group mailing list. But Rich, I will task myself and Richard to bring everything up to date on the wiki.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
No point. Good point.
Do we have any other announcements, or at this point, any other old business that didn't make it to the agenda that needs to be briefly discussed? Well, hearing none, may I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. I won't be too formal and ask for a second, but I will thank everyone for coming. I did skip over one critical thing, and that was asking for a volunteer for the next meeting to both facilitate and take notes. We've tended to do that at the start of these meetings, and sort of it kind of delays things. Do I have anyone to volunteer at this time to be a facilitator or a note taker? And if not, I will certainly put the call out to the communications list and work really hard to make sure we find someone for the next meeting so that I don't leave you all hanging.
I can take notes, Linda. This is Rick.
Okay. And I think Rick just volunteered for the more difficult task. And thank you to Mike Jarlow for doing that this time.
Linda, this is Margaret Mellinger at OSU. I'll volunteer to facilitate.
Great. Well, now I will let you all off the hook and say thank you for attending the meeting, and if not before, talk to you in a month.
Thanks all. Bye.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Cinda.
Thanks, everyone.
Linda.
Bye.
Bye.